the minutiae of federated learning. But once the controllers have all the updates for the models, they would aggregate them and they would be, like I said, sharing model update to the registry. Thank you. Of course, we want to go into monetization, but there's one final point to be covered on this one slide, which is how exactly do we expect fusion to occur? How exactly do we expect monetization to even begin? And that's where I feel an API management layer is so critical, because for multiple data twins to interact with each other, where every single one of these data twins is potentially a black box to other, these twins should be exposing APIs. And so every twin would have an API management attached, which would let controllers define how they expose their twins outwards. So the controllers would expose their twins via API management. So the platform would let people discover these APIs as well, so that anybody who wants to consume your twin as part of their own aggregated fusion twin can consume them from here. We're also expecting custodians to consume the API management to expose data via APIs. So this is basically a centralized API management which would take care of both custodians and controllers in the same place. And finally, we have Identity Access Management Gateway, which would expose the data and models to the consumers at the other end. So again, the consumers have the same user and service roles. Service can be, again, fusion models which exist at a higher plane than this. So I'm going to cover very briefly how smart contracts would be used here, because like I said, incentivization on the network is super critical. And we felt that while government grants would be a major constituent, the platform eventually has to have some inbuilt viability as well. So that's where this comes in. Again, it's not too different. We've seen some of these blocks earlier. So this just represents the platform services, shared services. We've seen the custodians on the last slide. We've seen the controller on the last slide as well. So those are well known. We also know that in a typical federated learning scenario, the model would flow from the controller to the custodian, and the data and the model updates would flow from the custodian to the controller. Well-known things. The question is, how do you incentivize multiple participants? So that's what we try to solve here. So this large gray rectangle that you see represents that very tiny small smart contract section that we had in the previous slide, representing the shared platform services. And we've decided to take a microservices view to creating and deploying these smart contracts. The idea is very simple actually, and I like to call it the auto rickshaw model. I'll come to that auto rickshaw analogy in a while, but the point is, we've taken the idea of reputation to solve the problem of incentives. We know that data has to flow from custodians to controllers, and that insights have to flow from controls to consumers. That's the basic objective of the platform. Now, controllers would only get data from, or would only purchase data or data hours or compute from custodians if they were A, reputed enough, B, economical enough, C, trusted enough. And that's what this smart contract tries to do. So it's called a trust assessment smart contract. It's an aggregator of sorts. So it basically says that trust can be defined as a function of three things. The first is the confidence of the provider itself. So in this case, the custodian creates their own confidence score. They basically self-report. They say that, I am X% confident in the quality of my own data. And so we say, okay, fine, your self-report score, we assign it some weight and we let it slide. It's like, what happens in your typical annual appraisals in your company. You have your own self-reported score. It doesn't really count for much because the manager then appraises and gives you a totally different score. But again, it's something of a baseline. It tells us what exactly do custodians think about themselves. So we take that as an input. On the other end, we have the endorsement smart contracts, which is, like I said, to take the appraisal analogy a step further, you do a self-appraisal and then your manager does your appraisal as well. So this is third parties doing your endorsement. So these could be entities who have done business with you or entities who are just on the platform and they're consuming data insights from other places as well. Will assign higher weight to people who have done direct business with you, so that people who have actually worked with you can endorse or their endorsements can carry a higher weight. So this takes care of endorsements. We did discuss that it's quite possible that there are malicious actors on the platform who would try to poison these endorsements. And so we need to find a firm way of dealing with those malicious partners. And we felt that the best way to do it would be to assign a higher weight of endorsements to participants who already have a high trust. It's like saying that if I try to poison your Google reviews, it will not carry that much of a weight unless I myself have a high reputation on Google. So that's an important criteria here when third-party endorsements kick in. And finally, to have an objective parameter, we have something called the reputation smart contract. So the reputation smart contract is super objective. It only looks at completed successful transactions on the platform between custodians and controllers. So it computes a score on the basis of your completed successful transactions and gives you an objective score. Now, these are going to report individual scores, and the final smart contract is going to assign weights to each of them and compute an aggregated score, which will give us the final trust score to be assigned to, let's say, this custodian. Now, the next time or any time a consumption is made on the model, the consumer is paying the controller. The controller then checks how much information is being transacted, again, in terms of the model used or how much weight was assigned to the custodian's own vintage of data, stuff like that. Append the trust score to that computation and then pay the custodian their fee. Now, for each of these transactions, we are also saying that the controllers would be paying a platform fee as well to ensure that the platform also keeps managing, updating itself, and the custodians also end up paying a platform fee. Now, this ensures that all entities on the platform or on the network are well compensated for whatever they are doing, and we can also take this a step further. I've just talked about custodians who are getting paid for their data by controllers, but we can apply this same model to controllers who are exposing models to aggregators of models. So those model aggregators will in turn pay these controllers for the models consumed using the same basic structure of reporting. Now, who decides how much to charge, whom to charge, when to charge? I will now come to my auto rickshaw analogy to talk about that. But before that, a quick quiz. How many of you have been to Mumbai? I'm sure you two were in Mumbai. At least two people were in Mumbai. How many of you have been to Bangalore? How many of you have taken an auto rickshaw in Mumbai? Good, a good few number. And how many of you have had the distinct displeasure of taking an auto rickshaw in Bangalore? चलो एक क्विकली बताओ फर्क क्या है इन दोनों के अंदर? मीटर. You go to Mumbai and you know for a fact कि 4 साल पहले मुंबई के अंदर if you had to travel 1.5 kilometers, they would charge you 18 rupees. 2 साल पहले it used to be 21 rupees. Right now it's 23 rupees for 1.5 kilometers. And there's an incremental known charge for every additional kilometer you travel. Okay. In Bangalore, it is pretty much Bhagwan Bharose, which means that you get into a haggling match with your auto rickshaw driver, they decide not to beat you and to pay them whatever they want. So that's how it works in Bangalore. And believe that the platform can adopt a similar approach here. I'm not saying Bangalore hi banana hai isko. All I'm saying is the platform can have both models. We can have fixed charges for consumption of data as well as models, as well as allow entities to define their own charges and subscription rates as well. Of course, we feel that if there are entities who do not work with these standard rates, their consumption would be lower and obviously they would get pushed out by competition. But I feel at this point, we should allow competition and market economics to derive and drive how the platform itself operates. So yeah, so that's the end of a very bad analogy. But like I said, the platform and this sort of structure of contracts would ensure that either of those scenarios can equally play out and work. So I took a long time. Questions? We are fine. Yeah. Chalo. मेहनत सफल हो गई. Thanks a lot.
Can we consider these 3 slides as a baseline for the architecture, and if something new emerges, that will be incorporated as part of this? Can we everybody agrees with that? Yeah, okay. Thank you. So, means this was the most difficult part, and I think it is a great achievement to have some architecture in place, detailed one, and which addresses the 3 concerns about the data from where we started. Privacy related, commercial sensitivity related, and the incentivization related. So that is a great achievement. And that if that is handled, then you come to the AI mod part where you create a national fabric and pre-trained models are available. You can leverage that. Now, the gaming part, we wanted to incorporate and make gaming as a core part of this for the scenario planning. Whether this architecture, what we are doing, it is it is covering everything, or we have to come up with something additional as far as upper layers are concerned, where stakeholders will be interacting with this platform and doing some scenario creation.
This will be extended. Even this would work. Yeah, sorry. So even for, I think when we took that up, we actually worked at a very in a very abstractive fashion. We didn't talk about specifics of who's training or who's getting data or who's being paid for it or for which vertical it's being built. So we built it to be generic from the get-go, which means we can actually replace custodians with controllers and controllers with aggregators of controllers, and it would still work. So in that fashion, I think it would work even at higher levels as well. So even for gamified scenarios, it would still work.
Any input from the people who have worked in the virtual world session, whether they need any additional thing in this architecture, or you want to come up with another slide? Anyone from the virtual world session, can you suggest or comment on this?
Thanks. No, at a very high level, this looks appropriate. This looks, meeting the requirements from a virtual world perspective. I think the thing which really intrigued me and which probably can be used in virtual world also is the reputation, part, because and the weighted approach to certain things, because if for water people, there might be some things which would be central concerns, but for transportation that might be secondary. So a weighted matrix of such concerns can really help solve many problems. So yeah, in short, it looks good. Thanks.
No, my question is that I am on this side when I am interacting and doing some scenario planning. Am I correct? So what actions I will be taking and how this system will be responding to that. So I want to change the route of the route plan of the metro. I want to change the location of the metro station and see the impact. So I will be interacting this side, from this side.
I'm super scared of climbing right now, but I'll try. So when you are somebody on the right, you would probably be consuming a model by somebody who's here, right? And this model would have
I
parameterized
am
some of
interacting
these.
in a natural manner
Yeah.
that I want to drop some object like a bridge
Yeah,
on a Hyderabad road. So I will pull something
yep,
and place it.
yep, yep.
Now this model should tell me that what is the change in the situation.
So you will interact with them through via this gateway,
Web apps or mobile apps or something else.
or like I said, it could be a model that even you have trained. It could be another model that you've trained.
No, I am interacting through metaverse world or some. So what application is required at this web apps?
Web apps, mobile apps, they
Maybe.
will both work.
Okay.
They would both work.
Okay.
Eventually, they're
And
all
you need some layer here that
Yeah.
whatever my interactions are there, those will be converted and passed to this model.
which is where the APIs via the gateway would come in. This would be APIs all the way down. So you would interact with these models via APIs every single time. And we will be defining standard ways of defining those API structures as well.
Right. So if somebody is going through this architecture, whether he will make a inference that yes, it is metaverse enabled or no, we need to write something.
You can actually detect some of those information via the model registry itself. So the models themselves can have tags as to whether those models are for AR, VR, or they are for natural language processing, or they're for LLMs, etc. So the model registry would actually ensure those tags are visible. And maybe we can also surface those tags as part of the APIs. That's also
So
possible.
should we create a document that what we mean by these boxes?
Yeah.
And so we will be list out. And if we want to engage with the citizens and they want to suggest something, what we were discussing that people are making a local conversation and those local conversations can be converted into summaries and that can be mapped on a digital twin and then these AI models can rate them or rank them. So how that interaction will play, means where they will be interacting.
So they'll just be here, working with web apps or mobile apps, and all the models would be there. So they will only have to worry about an API interaction into a model.
So I think we should create some document that what it means, what web means and how broad it is or how diverse it is.
Yeah.
So how we can capture.
We've actually been very lazy because we mentioned the data sources, but we're very, very lazy about this section.
Okay, so this was the last piece.
Yeah.
Shortly backpedaling a little bit about model capabilities, I would like to bring up that a framework for that does exist with the Digital Twin Consortium and their periodic table of digital twin capabilities. So that might be a good foundation to build on top of, even if not we are not using it for the tags and what all each model will be able to do. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, please.
So the thing that we're just talking about, the vernacular languages, it should directly interact with the custodians, right? So say for example, if there is voice data, or say a farmer, if he's talking about his challenges, it should directly go to a custodian instead of going via the gateway and controller express. My thought process, Sanchit, if you'd like to.
Even if you have to interact with the custodian, the only viable way that is suggesting for it to happen is via APIs. And those APIs, if you notice, the custodians are actually connected to this API management layer. So even if, let's say, a controller has to interact with the custodian, they would consume an API. That API can be a REST API, an async API exposed. The same would happen when you're consuming those models from this location. Even if it has to go to a custodian, it would only happen via an API.
I'm sorry, actually what I thought was the arrows basically are showing the flow of data. So,
Okay, so no. So again,
that's not right. Okay.
Yeah, so because again, some of this has to be taken in the context of federated learning. Because in the context of federated learning, you would never actually flow the data from the custodian to the controller. You would only ever flow updates to models. In which case, there's no data flow happening at all. We have this arrow from the custodian to API management for scenarios where centralized learning may happen. And yeah, for those scenarios, you'll definitely go directly to the custodian for their data, and that may happen for the controller or for this consumer. But again, for either of those cases, it has to happen via the API only. Again, even if I let's say have to connect to your data directly, it will have to go via the platform, because the platform needs to know how these interactions are happening to keep getting the quality in place and to keep validating those transactions as well. Yeah.
So how, just my point was that if we start from this side, this is the end user side, and we create some flows and another slide, that if somebody starts from this side, what will happen? If they want to do scenario planning or they want to play with this, what will happen? And second is that the workflow, when citizens want to get engaged with system, what will be the workflow, how it will happen? Can we create a fork of digital twin where people can play, and if something good emerges out of that, we can absorb as part of this model? Means like we are doing in GitHub, branches are created, and if that is tested and validated, then you can include that as a part of the main thread. Whether that is possible, and we can do that.
So I'll say the motivation for that actually came up here. So if you check out Hugging Face, for instance, they have a marketplace of so many models, and you can consume those models, retrain them to build your own models, and then host that model back again to the marketplace, and it would be visible. So we expect this model registry to be that one place where you can discover, again, fork, and then re-upload, and that becomes your own version of that model as well. So yeah, so couple of points that I've taken from this. You have to be less lazy about this section, and you have to be more descriptive about what exactly do we mean by some of these things as well.
And whether we can create a slide which appeal. Yes, please. You want to raise? You want to comment anything, Amri? You want to say anything? No. Okay. So whether we can make a slide which appeals to the business people, with no clutter, no details, but only money. They can see the money. So how we can generate a slide where only rate cards are there and you can make money? Dollar. So whatever is created, knowledge is created. So how we can describe, and who can describe that? So only the front end, you are having products, their rate cards, and you can see the business out of this. Who can help in that, in creation of that? So when we start interacting with the leaders or the CEOs, then we can start with that slide. Okay, Rajat has volunteered to create that slide. So I think it's a very good outcome. It will help take it forward. Thank you. Any questions?
So that means that with the custodian, the data is there. So we are talking about the regulatory sandbox here, and we are talking about the data sharing agreements here, and only the knowledge will flow there. So that is why we are not talking about these things in that particular model.
Data would never enter the platform for whatever reason. So there are two main assumptions. I think maybe it's not in this in the note of this slide, but there are two very key requirements. We do not store any custodian data. We do not even store model data. So let's say you have an LLM and you have your embeddings. We don't store that. If you have a bucket for where you store a model, it still remains there. There is no data stored on the platform. It's being used primarily for discovery and some of these stateless tools. But yeah, no data ever enters the platform.
So whenever some person subscribes to that particular model, then only he can put that data and work on it.
Yeah, so the assumption is if let's say we take up centralized learning, for instance, where you need more data in your own premises. Yeah, you'll have to load it in your own premises, but it would never reach the platform, even for those scenarios. The data never comes
how are we taking care of the model poisoning thing? here.
So in those cases, I think the incentivization model works very well because we are talking about trust. So as soon as because that is broken into three main components, right? So there's the self-confidence score, there's the objective score, and there's finally the endorsement.
So if the trust score will also be there for the model providers.
So if the custodian poise a model, then they will get a lower score for endorsements. And the scores will keep going down as they keep poisoning, and they can be kicked out as well. Those are part of the policies of those smart contracts, which we can bring in.
Where we can get engaged to develop a behavioral model which are specific to in context, means how they will be interacting. So people's behavior models, how they will be captured and how they will be incorporated. Yeah.
I mean, I have not studied this in detail, but since there's a discussion, maybe this is relevant. Could you give us an idea about how and where the compute will happen, and what would be the nature of the flow of the metadata in terms of the discussion?
That's a very good question actually, and that's also one reason why this sandbox here is in blue and not black, because I believe that compute would be a major challenge. In fact, even this networking session, I've had many discussions with people and all kept talking about the lack of compute available to train their models. And that's why we incorporated the sandbox here for people to train their models. But I believe it has to be kept for very specific non-production scenarios only. I don't actually believe that the platform would be eventually responsible for training those models, because those are not core to discovery. We can use the sandbox for, let's say, making a few changes, discoveries, but if you have to actually train a proper model, the expectation, let's say for every single vertical, would be to provision a separate compute to train those models on, and then eventually flow those model metadata back to the platform in this model registry. And if there are any connections to be made, maybe in the knowledge graphs. But yeah, I don't believe we'll have serious compute here. I think you're right. It would have some compute, therefore some cache as well for the models that you're training. Yeah.
Okay, and will it have data or will it have metadata?
Well, it will have data, right? Again, when I say data, there's two kinds. Okay, actually there's three kinds. So there's structured, unstructured, semi-structured. So if I'm training models, what am I generating? I'm generating embeddings, I'm generating sort of blobs, and that's not really usable data. I mean, it's data, but it's a model data. So I'm storing it there. And also, if I'm using this sandbox to train on some data, that training data would also be there. So it's going to contain training data and the model itself. The model itself, like I said, can be a blob that you would store in objects.
So set up parameters, essentially.
Yeah, yes.
The data is flowing in sandbox.
Again, yeah, if it has to flow, the sandbox is the place. If it has to flow, the sandbox is the place.
That means that should be also a regulatory sandbox maybe.
Regulatory sandbox is different because it's not really a tech thing. This sandbox is a technical sandbox where people are training, testing their models on training data. The regulatory sandbox actually has got nothing to do with technology. All we are saying is that in Sangam, where we have multiple industries, multiple sectors coming together, it is quite possible that for some of those use cases to work, there may be some regulatory changes required. And so for those things to be tested out, we need a regulatory sandbox. It's not a tech thing. It's just
but even there we might require it, I mean.
Yeah, so quite possible that regulatory sandbox run karne ke liye, let's say there is a TRI requirement, or let's say there is an RBI requirement that you have to run it in a specific isolated sandbox. So therefore, this is going to emerge out of this in those cases where you have when you're running a regulatory sandbox, you require isolation, and so you create this. So that may emerge. That's why again it's in blue. I don't expect it to be there on day one. Day one, if we are running those verticals should have their own compute to train their own models, and then use this framework to expose them to other verticals for consumption.
Right. And I think, so the digital twin part which would, or the AR VR can be covered in visualization box,
Yeah,
which you've
yeah,
mentioned.
that's here.
So it can be covered there.
मतलब डब्बे इसमें ज़्यादा थे, but then it would have been, it was very cluttered, so I made it as simple as possible.
So here I have a question. With this architecture, will we be able to achieve federated digital twin?
Federated learning?
Federated digital twin concept, whichever okay, Sari is okay.
Yeah.
He's okay, focusing on that only.
So that's the idea, right? So whether you want to build a federated digital twin or whether you want to do federated learning, again, a digital twin will eventually emerge out of federated learning. So the primary objective of building this platform was to build something which would definitely work for federated learning. And that's what we did, right? So you have custodians who are never going to flow their data out to controllers. हाँ वो बात वो भी सही बोल रहा है जो बोल रहा है. But again, the point is, since it works in the context of federated learning, yeah, it will work for digital twins. Sir, I'll let you say on that.
It seems to be we have to work more precisely. Then we'll get to know whether it will work or not.
Of course, I mean that's the beauty of this session. ये draft है, so draft है. We still have a week.
So I think that it covers the elements which are required, but these elements may be at a different place. So when you create a federated digital twin, you will find that one box is a multiple location. So knowledge graph, which is mentioned here, that knowledge graph maybe with the sectoral digital twin, one knowledge graph maybe with the national fabric. So we have to map these elements. These are the essential elements which are important. I think this slide is important, but we can map this to a deployment architecture. And this is a functional architecture.
Yeah.
Then you can have a deployment architecture and you can pick these elements and you can mention that how it will look like in a deployment architecture.
कल तक इसमें visualizations भी नहीं था.
Why? Because here na, madam suggested ke Kumud madam, the same way, data poisoning related okay or model poisoning related issues, with the trust we cannot okay able to achieve. There is a other okay future technologies are like you need to go for a zero trust architecture
So
policy.
again, like I said, so there are a few things here, right? I think I probably have it. Yeah. So data security, that answers everything. Like I said, so it's at a very high level. If I try elaborating these, I'll have slides upon slides.
Okay.
So yeah, your questions are answered here.
And
Yes.
yeah. So I think from the data poisoning perspective, you need to create a one slide where data will be coming from a trusted sources or a less trusted or a untrusted sources. So there may be gatekeepers. There may be gatekeepers and there may be a circuit breakers. That once you come to know, you can fall back to a previous version and you can disconnect all those sources. So you should have some governance framework. And that governance framework will take care of this poisoning of the data. So what institutional mechanism will be available, what tools and utilities will be available to address that. So yes, that is important and we can have another slide on that. So now one piece we need to note down is that how the Indian behavioral models will be developed and incorporated in this. So we can mention this or in another slide how we can do that. And another piece which is not related to this, I think, is what is the role of communication networks, advanced communication networks to make it scalable. This is a functional architecture. Now we want to make it scalable and we want to make it available anywhere, anytime. And to achieve that, there is a role of advanced communication network. So with the help of experts from the telco sides or a communication or a computation side, we can also create another slide where we can illustrate that how those capabilities will be helping to achieve this initiative at scale. Yeah. So now next is I will request Kumud to share one slide or information related to the hardware part. We can have a discussion over that.
I think I've missed that inside. I'll just add it.
So what Kumit will be displaying is that we have gathered information from someone that what is the typical hardware which will be required. So we were discussing the sandbox, and compute power was the key area where many of us might be struggling. How to make that available, compute power, and who can make it available. So before that, we need to identify the type of requirements and the sizing of that requirement. So we should be clear that what we want. This is also a draft. We have gathered information from someone. Just you can have a look and then comment, and we will modify this. So when we will be migrating towards, moving towards a stage 2, how many users will be there? How many concurrent users will be there? How many instances will be running in a concurrent way? And what may be the typical sizing? Means what kind of a processor, memory size, or ports or operating systems are required? What kind of a license, VMware license are required or not? What kind of a metaverse licenses which may be required, or some kind of a GPU or a CPU requirement may be there. So currently it is a specific, there may be more options, or there may be a different requirement of a different quantity.
So basically it covers the different servers which may be required, and then the softwares which may be required, then there are different nodes, storage, networking components. So can you get the mic, please? No,
So I think I also have this question. What does this 24 users mean
it's
here?
just for estimation purpose, that if we take it for 24 users, this kind of a
Suppose we have a sandbox environment, and suppose there are 10 use cases on which we are working in the Sangam initiative, and every use case is being developed by multiple organizations because there are multiple elements. So different organizations are working on different pieces. So what will be the concurrent requirement?
Like 24 users will be working on the same environment.
Concurrent,
in
so many
different
users and concurrent instances. You can change it. Just we have started with some figure.
I think one thing that will be required, very difficult to look at these kind of things and say how this will cater to the requirements. What would help is to have a flops number, teraflops, how many floating point operations.
Suppose from DOT side, the question which was asked yesterday, and we were looking for is that how much fund is required. And one fund is required to set up this computation power for experimentation or for a sandbox. So if we want to facilitate the experimental setup, we should be clear about our hardware requirements and license requirements and tools and utilities requirements.
Right, no, I understand that. But what I'm saying is that
Yeah, you are saying that we should talk of, the
in terms of floating point operations per second, that's the performance rating.
Yeah.
And then decide on what the cost factor is and look at different configurations rather than saying, oh, I need 256 GB RAM and
So
I don't know.
what you are saying that it will emerge from something. But before to arrive at this, you need some input.
I think what we should collectively set up is, this is the requirement, these many floating point operations per second, this may be 100.
So who will be able to tell that figure?
That we will have to work out.
So
And then we'll ask
Yeah.
the third party vendors, a person who has suggested you this,
Yeah.
to give us different options.
So whether we should seek information from every team,
Possibly.
Yes,
whether
every
they will
team
be
can add
they
it
will
in
be
the
able to
document.
convey this team, or they will require support of somebody else.
Sir, in Mumbai, we
tried to get down to this level. We tried to do a bottom-up sizing of the use case that we were concluding. And it was fairly like, okay, assuming that so much of data would be there for 1 year, 1.5 years, etc., what would be the size and hence what would be the space to process this, these kind of models would be built, so hence the compute, etc. I don't think we were able to reach to a conclusion, but it is my view that for, let's say, stage 2, if we shortlist 3, 4, X or X number of use cases, let's be laser focused on them and we can do a bottom-up required. Or else any quick benchmarks from other digital twin can also help to do a rough number of funds that you're looking for.
Because it is required. We want to make this arrangement. Either the hyperscalers or a cloud service providers will come forward and they will offer that this as a facility, or we need to make arrangements. So we need to know that what is required. Yeah. लेकिन जो यूज केस लेकिन जो यूज केस वाले लोग हैं, यूज केस टीम में क्या लोग हैं जो दे आर गुड,
अगर नहीं है तो होना चाहिए
था एक्चुअली,
अगर नहीं है तो होना चाहिए.
नहीं तो अभी कौन रेडी है इसमें?
From our side, I can work with madam. I mean, I have some ideas. We've done this. But of course, I can't do it for everyone.
So sir, we can do that. Each use case can come back because as I said, in Mumbai we attempted that कि इतना data processing power, hardware का इतना, we even went into the licensing cost as well.
कितने दिन में मतलब हमें इसका आंसर मिल जाएगा? 2-3
From side,
so
1 week.
Give us couple of days to at least vet it also, or otherwise it would be.
So in a week's
time, लगेगा. It would be use case specific. We can come up.
Because we have to release this document in a week's final document. It is a draft document. For each use case. For each use case.
Each use case, and then we can have a conversation.
And as I think Sanchit asked yesterday where that geospatial digital twin content will be residing. So in a final deployment scenario, it may be somewhere else. But from the perspective of POC, though it will be for a limited area, limited geography, but we have to host it.
Yeah. And just to clarify, here we are talking about primarily development and a little bit of deployment requirements, right?
Yes, yes. Development and demonstration.
Hi, I'm here as a representative from Axmem, and I would like to volunteer additional information related to the sort of compute power required for the same, since we have a digital platform in use right now. So our system, as at the moment, scales all the way from a basic Intel NUC to a server rack, which may have like Xeon processors and a similar configuration to what is being shown there. The reason I wanted to bring this up was because I am in agreement with the other speakers from the audience who have mentioned this. Each project will be able to sort of identify the requirements that they have for this specific use case.
Yeah. Thank you.
Since we are talking about software enclaves, which are those trusted execution environments where the code will be running, maybe we should have Intel XGX also in this sizing. तो एक extra वो add करना पड़ेगा इसमें. I'm not sure about the pricing or whether it comes with this, but yeah, we need to add Intel XGX to this.
Definitely, we can add.
So we can circulate. I think we can circulate and take comments, and people can come up with the
the output
difference.
document itself,
Yeah.
and you can give comments over there.
Okay.
So if we can get for each use case this kind of a configuration of what exactly is your requirement, so that will be. And even if we do not have the exact data size, we can scale that up further. If suppose we tell that for 1 TB data we require this much is the cost, so for 100 TB we can calculate later.
वो assumptions ही लगेंगे. People will put up their assumptions only.
And Bombay में maybe we were not ready with the use cases, so we could not figure out. But now I think we are ready with the use cases, so we can get to some figure.
एग्जिस्टिंग वाले से भी बात करें तो वो पूछेगा कि क्या चाहिए.
नहीं, in terms of rental. Rentals का एक टाइप का कॉस्टिंग होगा. अगर कुछ
अभी तो पहले साइजिंग पे, टाइप एंड साइजिंग पे,
Sizing and then negotiations.
मॉडल आएगा.
Actually, CDAC Pune is having a supercomputer where they do have A100 GPUs available in 100 numbers. So that will be one of the source. Actually, GPU is missing over here. A100 NVIDIA GPU.
GPU is there na?
A100 is the highest.
Number 30.
A100.
Okay,
Yeah,
you need a
NVIDIA,
different,
this GPU is a smaller one.
a smaller one. You need a different one.
Yeah. A100 is the top GPU.
Okay.
I don't know. If she scrolls down.
A6000 is good, sir.
Yeah, latest is the A6000. But Pune has A100 GPUs with them. They do. CDAC Pune is having.
CDAC is one of the participants.
That's the reason why I was
We can
feeling
talk
like
to them.
if.
So they have planned or it is already there? Okay. Yeah. So
NVIDIA,
we should
right?
finalize our requirement, then we can speak to them. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. So finally, when we can go back to that architecture slide that is there. So it is all good, but we need to contact these people and we need to contact these people. So this, जो sandwiched है दो बीचों में ये तो तैयार हो जाएगा, all are there. But data providers, we need to reach out them. It requires effort. So we need your support. We can reach out to them. And we need to reach out to these people who will be consuming this. They are the client or they are the customer. They will be validating a use case. So we need to work on these two pieces and we have to refine and solidify that what we have done. These three things we have to do. With that, I think we can close
So we
today.
will be in touch through Microsoft Teams from now on. So we are having different teams for all the verticals. So as you all have, if by chance you have not received your Microsoft Teams password and username, you can send an email. We will get that created and you can be a part of those teams and start discussing or having VCs. So we can be in touch through that.
And I want to say that only 4th networking event is over. Yet Sangam stage 1 is not over. We need to work more and finalize the document. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. We have got tea also outside being served, so you can have tea and then leave, please. We can have a group photo, so I request everyone to please come up on the stage for a final group photo.